Hello, what's up guys, Medium Guy here and welcome to the next video on my channel. And in this video we're going to walk through this Sshwifty tool, which is a web-based SSH proxy, and for more details stick with me. So suppose in a scenario where your SSH servers are in a place that you cannot directly connect, like for example in a private network, or more generally in a place, in an address where you're blocked to directly make SSH connections. So as you can see right over here, the Sshwifty tool will be sitting between you and your SSH servers, being the proxy, which also provides a web-based user interface, and you as the client will be using your browser to access the Sshwifty's user interface and then make connections to all the SSH servers that is accessible to the Sshwifty tool. So you as the client won't actually need to install SSH CLI, since you'll be accessing the Sshwifty's web interface. And behind the scenes, Sshwifty will do all the connections to the target SSH servers. So with having all this in mind, I'll move to the GitHub repository for the Sshwifty tool. And right over here, you're getting the documentations on how to set up and configure the different options based on your use cases. So if you want to go deeper in all the features that this tool will provide, you can actually give a visit to this documentations right over here, but I'm going to just skip these parts and move to the configuration options. And over here we can see that we can actually configure the Sshwifty with a configuration file, or actually using the environment variables to actually configure the exact same configurations. In this demo, I'll try to use the environment variables, and as you can see right over here, we've got all the lists of the available variables that we can actually configure our Sshwifty tool. So I'm going to use the configurations for enabling TLS certificates and a list of my presets. So using this configuration, I can actually define my target SSH servers, and for the next uses I won't be required to input a lot of repeated values. So next I'll try to move to the VS Code right over here, and as you can see, I've got some configuration files prepared in order to demonstrate all this in a Docker environment. So I'll put all these files and configurations in my GitHub repository, for which you can find the relevant link down in the description section of this video. So as you can see, I've got a Docker Compose file, and in this I've got only one service, which is the Sshwifty itself, and I'm using the Sshwifty's official Docker image as it is documented in the README right over here. So I'll scroll to the exact same place that the documentation is providing with a Docker run command, and over here as you can see I'm using the exact same image. So I'll move back on the port section. I'm mapping the exact port that the Sshwifty server will try to listen inside the container, and I'm mapping the exact same port to the outside network, and as a result the clients will be using the host machine's IP address, which is hosting the Sshwifty's container, and using this exact port they will be able to communicate with the Sshwifty inside the container. So I'm setting the restored policy to always, and no matter what, for whatever reason that this container might be stuck or stopped, the Docker engine will try to restore this container and try to maintain its up status. So on the environment variables, you can see that I'm providing with the available environment variables that we saw in the README file in the GitHub repository, and over here by setting the shared key, I am able to put a lock on my web interface for the Sshwifty tool. So the clients should be providing it with this exact value in order to unlock the Sshwifty's user interface to access all its features. So right over here in the presets section, I'm providing it with a JSON value, which is an array of objects, and each object is an SSH server target. And over here you can see that I'm passing the host on which my SSH target is available and accessible by the Sshwifty tool. I'm setting the authentication method to the password, and I'm passing it with the fingerprint of my SSH server. So knowing all this, the Sshwifty won't be asking for the address of the SSH server and requiring to accept the fingerprint of the SSH server and all other values that we provided right over here. So next I'm passing the address and I'm binding the listen interface to the 0000, which will actually stand for all the interfaces available for the Sshwifty container. So lastly, right over here, I'm passing the TLS cert and TLS key file, the address of the two files that I'll try to mount inside the container, which will be accessible by the Sshwifty server. And finally, right over here, I'm mapping the ./certs directory to /certs inside the container. And actually, this is the directory that I'll try to create next to my Docker Compose file and put all my cert and key files inside this directory. So next, I'll try to move to the terminal right over here. I'll hit ls to make sure I'm in the exact same place that I've got my Docker Compose file, and if I move to the certs directory, I'll hit ls, and over here I'll try to create my cert and key file. So I'll try to define the domain variable with the value of the address of the Sshwifty that later I'll try to access. So this is the exact address for my Docker host machine, and in your case you can actually provide it with your exact address of your host machine. So it can be IP addresses or real domain names, but eventually it should be the address of the Docker host machine that will be running the Sshwifty's container. So next, using the OpenSSL command, I'll try to use the RSA algorithm to create my key file. I'll hit enter, and if I hit ls, I should see my key file is created. So next, again using the OpenSSL command, I'll try to output my CSR file, which is the file that I can use to request for cert files out of my key file. So I'll hit enter, and if I hit ls, you can see that right now my CSR file is also created. And lastly, again by using the OpenSSL command and passing it with my CSR file, I'll try to create and output my cert file. So right over here you can see that I'm passing the days that I want this cert file to be valid, and you can actually provide it with whatever value that you want. So I'll hit enter, and if I hit ls, you can see that my all three files are created. I'll hit ls-lh to make sure that all my files are not actually an empty file. So actually a point over here is that you can see that my file names are exactly the same that I provided in my environment variables section. So I'm mapping the ./certs directory to /certs inside the container, and inside the /certs directory I've got the exact same files that I provided right over here in the environment variables section. So right now all my files and configurations are looking good, and right now I should be able to create containers out of this Docker Compose file. So again, I'll move to the terminal, I'll move a directory back, I'll hit ls, and if I say Docker Compose op-d, I should expect that my container with a network be created, attaching my container to that created network. So if I say Docker Compose ps, I should be able to see the containers that have been created by the exact same Docker Compose file that exists right in my working directory. And as we can see, a container has been created 16 seconds ago, which is in op status, and exact ports are being mapped to the inside the container. So if I say Docker Compose logs -f to follow the logs, and --tail 100 to grab the latest 100 lines of the outputted logs of these containers. So as I can see, things are looking good, and the Sshwifty server is successfully bound to the IP that I provided in my environment variable section and serving over TLS. So right now I'll try to move to the browser on the exact address on the port 8182. I'm trying to access the web interface for the Sshwifty, and as you can see, it is complaining about the self-sign certs that we just created. And since I am the person that just created those files and I do trust myself, I'll just hit the advanced button and proceed to site anyway. So you can see that the interface is locked and is requiring a passphrase. I'll move back to the Docker Compose file and try to copy this value that I passed to the shared key environment variable and move back to the interface, and I'll try to paste and authenticate myself in order to access all the features behind this Sshwifty tool. So as you can see, I have successfully authenticated inside the Sshwifty user interface, and over here by clicking on this plus button right over here, and as you can see, we can create both telnet connections and SSH connections. So actually I can choose SSH and input my SSH server address and credentials, and also I can choose the known remotes right over here, and as you can see, my lab SSH server is listed right over here as I passed all the information in the environment variables of the presets in my Docker Compose file. So I'll move back right over here. I'll click this lab SSH server, and as you can see, the host is set by default. The user that I want to make my SSH connections also right over here, and I'll try to hit the connect button right over here and try to input my password, and if I hit login, I should successfully make connection to my lab SSH server that is accessible by the Sshwifty service and is unreachable directly by my laptop, but using the Sshwifty service that is sitting between me as the client and my target SSH server and providing me with a web interface, I can actually make connections through the Sshwifty tool to my target SSH servers. So that's all for this video. I hope you'll learn something new in this one. If you have any questions, any recommendations, of course go ahead and ask me in the comment section down below. I've got videos about other tools that has other cool features that I'll put the relevant link for the playlist down in the description section also, and if you're interested you can give a visit. So if you found the video useful, please don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel, which will help grow the channel and motivate me to create more free contents like this. And with that, that's all for this video, and I hope to see you in the next videos.